Welcome back to Polar Warriors, the world's largest video support community for bipolar disorder. I'm so excited today to have my first ever special guest on the channel. She's known me for over 40 years and is literally the reason why I'm here today making these videos. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my mom, Sandy.
Hi, everybody.
Over the past few weeks, members of our Patreon community and Facebook have come up with some incredible questions to ask her. In fact, there were so many that we couldn't include all of them. If you haven't joined Polar Warriors on Patreon yet, you're missing out on some really good stuff. There's a direct link in the video description below if you'd like to check it out. Raising a child with mental illness is hard, to say the least. There's no user manual for it. No one plans on it, and people still aren't talking very openly about what it's like. I was diagnosed with type 1 rapid cycling bipolar disorder in my 20s. That set in motion a chain of life-altering events that not only impacted me, but my family as well. I really hope that this video helps some of you out there to not feel so alone. If you have any questions after watching the video, I now offer one-on-one coaching through polarwarriors.com. All that being said, let's jump right into the interview questions. We have nearly 30 of them to go over, so we'd better get started. Question number 1. How did you react inside when you found out that your son was diagnosed with mental illness? Did you blame yourself or feel any regret?
At first, my first reaction was just, I felt terrible. I felt like you had to go through so much ahead and you had so much to work through. But it was also relief because it had a name, this mystery thing that had been driving you. And so I knew the way was only forward. And so we started talking about medications, and that gave me huge relief. It was like, okay, we're going to have the fix in a pill. And then it ended up when you reacted to everything.
Lots of side effects.
Yeah. So that was kind of frustrating, but I just knew that there was not any going back. I had to accept where we were and go forward.
Awesome. Very good answer, if I must say so myself. Question number 2. My 29-year-old son has no interest in taking medications or looking for help. He's pulled away from the family for many years. Were you ever estranged, and what did you do to keep the relationship with Rob alive? Basically, what helped and what made it worse?
Oh boy. There's a couple different lines of answers to this, and one is me at 70 years old, and one is the me at 40 to 50 years old when we were going through it. I remember when I was going through it that it was horrible. Rob had pulled away, and probably by the time he was 16 or 17, and I could no longer really reach his heart. And I thought, okay, well, that's normal. He's a teenager. And then he was into more drugs and into more drinking and was living on his own. And then there was the time a friend called and said, he's in a bad way. He's high, he's cutting himself, and he wants to die. And so I was terrified, and he lived an hour and a half away. But I got in the car to drive there, and we called for help, for the police and an ambulance. And at that point, Rob was hospitalized and totally blamed me, and just completely pulled back and, would say mean things and hung up on me. He said, "You've lost your son," and hung up.
When she called the facility where I was being held on a 5150, I remember that the payphone rang, and I think I said some kind of expletive and hung up the phone. I just was at a place where I in no way could take accountability for what was happening to me. It felt I didn't understand the concept of mental illness, so I felt just like a giant victim, and everybody else was victimizing me in some way or another, or that it wasn't my fault that I ended up in that predicament. It's not my fault that I cut myself and took a bunch of pills and scared the crap out of my mom and had her have to call for an ambulance, but there were times like that where she would try her best to intervene as a parent, and then I would pull away. So we would become estranged for a period of time or stop talking. And I have a lot of regret for now, looking back, a lot of regret on the times that I cut her off, because we can't get that time back. But it was all a very necessary part of the process for both of us to kind of grow and get to where we are today. So yes, we were estranged. And as far as keeping the relationship alive, for me it was the little things, like little cards you'd send in the mail or little text messages that just said I love you, you know. It even if I didn't hear it at the time, it stuck. Like I remembered that you said this.
And I didn't respond, or you didn't respond some of the time, and I just knew it was out there that I loved you, and that was enough.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what made it worse as far as while we were estranged? What kind of things made it worse when we weren't talking?
I think what made it worse and made the estrangement more was me trying to fix you and control your choices. Like I wanted you to eat healthier or not drink or whatever. I never said it really directly. I was not a nag in that way. But what I really had to come from a place of my own growth where I had to let go of him and agree with myself that I was going to trust whatever choices he made, bad or good, and let him own them. It's like I gave him his life with a bow. I couldn't keep owning all of that and survive myself.
And that helped a lot once you let go a little bit. Then I kind of started going, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? It kind of changed that dynamic. Surprisingly, letting go sometimes can allow some healing to take place and to build that or rekindle that relationship. Not always, not everybody has the same relationship as we do. All right, so moving on to number 3. The person says, we have a family history of mental illness and believe our young daughter is showing symptoms. Her behavior is extremely hard to manage. I've been to therapists, school counselors, and even county classes on parenting. The schools want to know what I'm doing wrong. They keep asking what's going on at home. My daughter is fine at home, but when she goes to school, everything falls apart. Can you relate to this, and any suggestions?
Boy, I can. You were not fine at home. You not that it was awful, but very intense young man. And at one point I became a single parent, and of course it was all my fault. I had left his dad, and everything that I had done was it had to all be my fault. And the only thing I would say is I never stopped seeking knowledge, reading, talking with counselors about child rearing, trying different techniques. I was never an aggressive parent in the sense of spanking and punishment and that sort of thing. I would always try and talk, which was a problem kind of, because then the kids' eyes glaze over. But really just had to keep learning, keep trying, and not giving up. At this point, I had no clue what was going on. I had no clue of a diagnosis, just to remind you.
And it was hard to have the schools or counselors insinuating blame, or basically making you feel like it was because of the divorce or it was because of bad parenting or something, when it's really there's an impasse with a lot of the schools and educators that when it comes to that. And I get it. They see squirrely kids that don't have mental illness, that do have disciplinary issues at home. So it's kind of like a go-to of what's going on at home. We're doing our jobs at the school, so what's wrong with you?
Well, so there's just the reverse. It's not the school's work to raise your kid. So, it's a complex issue. Yeah,
absolutely. The question number 4. Person asks, how do you deal with the fear that your child might not survive living with mental illness?
By then I had to get really into the serenity prayer, really deciding, can I control this? Do I really have control over whether he survives? And I did not. He was an adult in his 20s at that point. When he was a teenager, there was a lot more fear that he would do something crazy. And
well, you were legally responsible for me, and so
well, true. But when he was an adult, I really had to work on letting him go, which it's really a form of respect, of respecting another being on the planet just for being here, and they have a right to that space. And they don't make the choices maybe I would, but you still have to give your blessing to it.
And it still doesn't stop you from worrying that fear of getting that phone call someday, but
that was a constant background noise.
Yeah. Especially during the hospitalizations or when I was cutting and stuff like that. It's just, I can't imagine how hard that is. I didn't think about it. I was so ingrained in my own suffering that I didn't have room to even consider how it was impacting other people in my family. So, question number 5. Have you ever had to call the police or have your son hospitalized against his wishes? How did this impact your relationship, and would you do it again?
Oh boy, this goes back to the estrangement. And yes, I have had to call the police one time, and they scooped him up and put him into the hospital. After that, I don't think he showed me very much reason to do that. I don't think he would allow me to know enough going on.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, I guess I became a little more shut down, or not communicating when I was struggling so much, so that I wouldn't end up in a situation like that. Again, that was kind of part of my withdrawing. But yeah, I remember that I swallowed I'd been cutting myself and swallowed enough pills to really do the job, and woke up with ambulance and police at my house, and I felt I was so upset. Again, I felt it couldn't have been me that put me in that circumstance. It was everybody else's fault. It was the inconvenience of being woken up out of bed and taken to a mental health facility and all that. I couldn't take responsibility for my own actions back then, and so the blame went right to my mom and family, and that was hard. I know that was hard on both of us. It really was. Next question is, what is one of your biggest regrets when it comes to raising a child with mental illness?
There was not enough resources. I mean, I could read all the how to raise your kid and how to deal with tantrums and all the books, and there was still kind of more to it. They don't, when you break a bone, you go to ER. But there's not an ER for mental illness. There's not a resource, there's not knowledge out there, not known publicly. It's better now than it was 30 years ago, but it's, got a long ways to go.
That was before internet. You couldn't Google your child's symptoms. I mean,
I'm glad.
So, yeah, resources, that's a really good one. Well, I'm glad a lot of families have resources, like even this channel,
if I'd only had that.
Yeah. Question number 7. What are some helpful things people with bipolar disorder can do to help maintain healthy relationships with their family?
Well, I read that and I thought, wow, that's more your question, actually. But, well, for me, it was learning over and over again to let go, to respect him as a separate person, not make judgments, not go like, well, I mean, you really were a little late, or don't you think you could have worn better clothes, or forget all of that. You become blind to little stuff and just have to fully accept them right where they are that minute, to get across that no judgment.
I think that's huge, because that shift in acceptance, where I didn't feel so on edge, I guess, made me open up a lot more and more comfortable to tell things. If you berate your child over something, whether it's their fault or not, or something they did, some stupid thing they did when they were manic or something, depending on how you go about talking to them about that, it could, really cause them to shut down and not tell you things in the future. So I think, having a very, letting go a little bit and letting your kid find a little bit of their own direction in the world I think that's great. If I were to answer that question, as far as maintaining healthy relationships with family, for me, it would be just education. Learning as much as you possibly can about it and sharing it with your family. And I know not everybody out there has a really good relationship with their family members, so if you have a family member that isn't interested in learning about your illness, don't let that stop you from progressing and making your own
That's for
growth.
sure.
So, I know my mom and I are super close, and we have a very awesome family dynamic, but not everybody does.
Well,
and so
now we are.
Now we are, yes.
And
It
it
wasn't
was-
always like that. That's true. So that hopefully that gives a little hope for some of you parents out there too, that we were bumping heads and not talking for years, and now I run a mental health channel. So it's quite the turnaround. Question number 8. Rob said that he was in denial for a while. When did you learn about the bipolar in relation to when Rob found out?
We learned that at the same time. I finally found a psychiatrist who was known for being incredibly skilled with mental illness, but also pharmacy. She had a huge background in pharmacy issues and medications. And so we met with her, and she explained a lot of this to us. Actually, I drove him there. But she explained a lot of it. So we basically found out at the same time. And he was totally willing, to work with it. And so we were working on it together.
Awesome. Yes. And then, did you know that he had bipolar before he accepted it? And if so, how did you approach trying to help him? So that would be...
No, I had no idea that it had a name.
Yes,
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, the symptoms were there, but we didn't know, we didn't have
know
a name for it. Or
why. One week you were in the bottom of the pits, and the next minute high as a kite, and everything was okay.
It was so easy to assume it was, he had a relationship breakup, that's
Yeah.
why he's so low.
Yeah.
Or, he's excited about a new hobby, so that's why he's running circles around everyone. It was hard to... It was awesome to get the diagnosis for both of us. I mean, but it raised just as many questions as it did answers.
Yeah.
To have a name for it was amazing, but then it was like, well, where do we go from there? And
Yeah.
that's been a whole different journey also. But I think as far as you approaching and trying to help me, when things did start getting bad, you were really good at planting tiny seeds of pointing out, hey, you notice the lows and the or the inconsistency kind of in emotions, and encouraging me that it doesn't have to be that way. She kept saying that, all of the suffering, it doesn't have to be a part of your life. We can do something about it. And it really helped encourage me to go do something about it. We didn't know what could be done or what the result was going to be, but we did something about it, and that was where things started to change in a lot of ways. And speaking of denial, though, I mean, we did get that diagnosis, and I wasn't warmed up to it at first. I mean, I remember you bought a couple of books and sent them to me, and I ended up having a book burning party and burnt the books before I read them. I just was I had to do things on my turn. It wasn't so much in denial. I mean, I knew something was wrong and needed to move forward with it, but it had to be I couldn't have somebody else plop a book down in front of me and say, read it. I had to be the one to find it at the bookstore and say, I think I'll read that book. I had to do it on my own terms, for me personally.
That's really important for people to hear, because, sure, we got this diagnosis together and this was awesome and we were going to work it out. And then there was a low and reactions to medications, and then the barbecue pit got the books I sent him. He burned them.
The reactions to meds, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was a huge discouragement in me moving forward with treatment, because we all have this illusion of when we're little kids that we go to a doctor and they give us a Band-Aid or they give us a pill and they make it all better, and they do it fast. So when you go to a doctor and they say, here's what you have and here's some treatment for it, and the treatment makes you 10 times worse, or the side effects are 10 times worse, it almost feels like that almost just a lot of resentment towards the doctor, resentment towards treatment, resentment towards trying that whole process of medications all over again.
I didn't get it at first, that there was going to be a lot of trial and error. She said that to us, but I didn't get that. I didn't hear it.
Just a passing thought until you really see the side effects come into play.
Are we willing to take this medication and then go off for 2 or 3 weeks and then try another one?
So that denial that I had, it took a long time of slowly subsiding, and a lot of that was slowly proving to myself of little improvements, small steps along the way of finding one medication that provided a little bit of relief. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there is a little bit of hope, or find one therapist that's just amazing, you know, and gives me some new ideas to think about the situation a little differently than I have in the past. It's just a total journey to go from, you know, being in denial and reaching a place of accepting it. So
other parents out there, I would say just stop and have a cup of tea, and don't think you've got it figured out at any point, and just be grateful for the good times.
Yeah, one day at a time. Absolutely. The next question is a good one. It's what differences have you noticed in Rob since he started the Polar Warrior YouTube channel?
That's the biggest change of his life. I'm married to a teacher, and he's always told me that teachers learn more than their students, that they learn more on how to express and the depth of understanding. That's exactly what he did. And over the time that he's had this channel, his personal growth is he's climbed mountains. And then he has names for things, so he can say, I'm in this place or that place, and I get it because I've watched the channel, and he's educated me too. It's made a major difference. I mean, 100% difference. Not that everybody's going to go start a channel. It's just, you know, that it's made a huge difference in your life.
I think the biggest things for me was, of course, like learning, you know, about everything as I research all this, but the accountability of having a community that looks forward to new videos and is like, hey, when are you going to come out with a new video? Can you talk about this on the channel? It's like I can't just stop when I have all these people that it's really enriching their lives. So that accountability of starting a channel, even if you start a small Facebook group or a small blog or anything that you want to do, if you feel like advocating in mental health, it's incredible how transformative it can be. When you teach something, you really embody it. So teaching anything in any capacity with mental health, even if it's teaching your family what bipolar disorder is about, it's just going to help you to know the illness a little bit better. So absolutely. And I've met some amazing life-changing friends through the channel. Some really neat people. All of you guys that comment and interact with the channel, I love you to death. Don't want to say love you to death, but I love you guys. It's awesome. I really enjoy the community. All right, so moving on. Did your mom get you involved in any outside activities that helped? My son has difficulty making friends.
I saw that question and I was like, oh boy, that is as different as every child on the earth. Some you could get instruction for or into sports and activities, and they would find that they just loved it. I was lucky. I thought, okay, discipline is the issue. I didn't know he had bipolar, so we experimented and ended up with karate, and it happened to be a very strong teacher, and he would demand Rob's presence and practicing, and you know, so that was a really big part of his reining it in as a young kid. But there's a lot of activities out there. Someone may love football or love whatever other sport or computers or, you know, anything. But what's important is to get some sense of focus if you can.
The karate was transformative for me. I was probably, I think, in 6th grade or right around adolescence when she got me into karate. And I think the appeal of the martial arts specifically is it's such a mindful activity. If you get your kids involved in something that's mindless, where it's not mind and body working together, it's easy for the mind to wander. You know, if a kid's playing a video game, their mind can wander off on, you know, but if you have a very specific focused activity like that develops motor skills and confidence and things like that, gymnastics, martial arts, anything that involves the mind and body and those team building characteristics is just, it's incredible. I mean, if on days when I was manic, I had an outlet for my energy. On days when I was depressed, I was around a group of energetic martial artists that would pull me out of that depression. I don't know what I would have done in my life if I didn't do karate. It helped with behavioral issues in school. I mean, just about everything. And not everybody's kid is going to want to be a ninja. So, if your kid doesn't want to do karate, then you might have to get a little bit creative. But emphasizing, activities or hobbies that keep the mind and body going and very a certain level of intensity, I think are just amazing for any child that's struggling with mental illness.
Well, that helped you, and I just encourage parents to keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying different activities until your kid takes to one.
Yeah.
Or if they're manic, takes to 20 of them. All right, moving on. Question number 11. Does your mom feel like she failed you? That's kind of a hard question.
Yeah, off and on through the years. I didn't have answers. The books weren't helping, and at points I would just feel like I was a total failure as a mom. I had the mom that held a daycare and had lots of activity with kids, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then we'd go another step further and grow a little more, and I wouldn't feel that way. So I moved in and out of feeling failure and blame and regret and success and hope. It would go back and forth. It would not just stay in one place.
I'm wondering if some of that failure, that feeling of failure, just comes from the sense of helplessness.
That's exactly.
It's like, I can't help my kids, so I'm a failure as a mother. I can't control a totally out of control bratty Robert, so I must be a failure. I could see that. So that's got to be hard. What helped you kind of overcome that?
And nothing but the next step, not giving up, trying something else after feeling so helpless. I've got a real stubborn streak in me of who I am, and I don't give up easily. I might fall down and want to suck my thumb for a while, but then I don't give up. I kept asking questions and trying more things.
And eventually things slowly started to come around.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, yep. Question number 12. What can I tell my teenagers and nieces to make them aware of bipolar disorder before they suffer from it without knowing?
I don't think you should put fear in kids' heads. It's so every time someone is a little blue, they're going to go, oh my God, I've got this mental illness. I really don't think that's necessary at all. I think if you see a kid struggling, then you might talk with them. But you can't prepare someone to look for symptoms, because we all have symptoms of feeling blue and feeling high and excited, and that's not something that you can do in advance. I think you just need to be in the day.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so moving on to question number 13. The viewer asks, I'd like to know how she coped with your hospital stays.
It was awful. No, I was very depressed, very unnerved, didn't sleep well. If your kid was in the hospital for a car accident, is that same kind of devastation and fear in the chest and, all of those issues. It was not an easy time.
And even after I got out of the hospital, actually, on that note, there was a whole transition period there too, because when I was in the hospital, they tend to give you a very high therapeutic dose of drugs, and you're in a very foreign environment. You're usually around a bunch of other people that are mentally unwell. And I'm not saying all this to discourage or make people afraid of being in an environment like that. In fact, it was incredibly life-saving and helpful for me, but there was also a transition period where I was pretty out of it when I'd get out of the hospital too. So it's not like my mom could just rush over and say, hey, how are you? Oh my gosh, I want to hear about it or something. I was pretty isolating. And
well, actually, that's when we were estranged. I didn't know any of the after.
Yeah, that's true. Tough times. I'm so sorry for half the crap I put you through.
I'm not.
It's a lot. But that it really did bring us together in a lot of ways. So, All right, moving on to the next one, question number 14. What was your reaction when you found out that your son had bipolar, and what was your instinct to do about it?
Oh boy, I'm a rescuer. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to, drive an hour and a half and pick him up, and then drive 4 hours to the psychiatrist that I had found, and I wanted to do all and be everything and rescue him. And when things didn't work easily, I got very discouraged and went through quite a bit of depression, and I didn't give up.
And I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, that's really good feedback. Yeah. Moving on to number 15. How do you feel about your son's illness compared to when he was first diagnosed?
I'm really proud. He's taken it, and working with helping others has been the biggest instinct that he's had ever of moving forward. I'm just very proud of the acceptance that you have and the courage it takes to accept what you're working with, as a person. That's big courage. We still talk, and you're way down and frustrated with health, and then in a day or so the courage comes back, and I see it. It's like the courage is rising. So no, I'm proud of him.
And when I was first diagnosed, there was so much, we both just didn't have any direction. We had to rely on a lot of the doctors and outside observations of others, and a lot of blind trust as far as kind of what I needed and what episodes I was having. And now I think after starting the channel, I've become so much more self-aware of the episodes that I go through, so it's more easy for me to take charge of my own bipolar and to say, oh, I'm a little manic today, or I'm a little depressed today. I need to be a little careful of that. So I think once I was able to start kind of self-managing, then she didn't have to have that instinct to do so much about it. It was easier for her to let go a little bit. So I think both of us working together has caused that change of just the perception of when I was first diagnosed till now. It's changed a lot. Moving on to number 16. What is the most significant thing that you can do to help your son manage his bipolar disorder?
2 words. Let him. There's nothing I can do. I mean, I could come over with your favorite food on a depressed morning or something, but I really need to let him manage it, because it is not my work.
Definitely.
Doesn't mean I don't love him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that was we kind of had that impasse or boundary where we both, for us, as I don't know if it's the same for other mother and son, but we just work better when she lets go and lets me kind of make my own mistakes, in a lot of ways. So she didn't let go completely. I mean, always there if I said, hey, I'm down and I need to talk to someone. I mean, always there.
That's different.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm just gonna totally let him do his own thing. The love was still there, but the desire to, I need to go make you an appointment and you need to take your meds and see the doctor, like that kind of stuff is, once that subsided, everything really turned around a lot.
Right.
Yeah. This next question is a good one, and I mean, this one might take a while, but did you notice any signs growing up that were odd? Where do we start?
I had no clue what I was looking at. Lots of little kids had different growth times. I mean, he was walking by the time he was 9 months, and he had a vocabulary that made him understandable by a year. And so that was all hooray. And in the years when he was little, he had a lot of rage that would be easily triggered. If he didn't get his way with a toy or something, or
temper
I took
tantrums.
something away.
I'd exhaust myself with temper tantrums.
Not simple temper tantrums. It was to the point where he would have his fists and scrape his arms, and pretty extreme. But the book said that's a temper tantrum, so what was I to know? I didn't know. But he grew up being very intense.
Never taking naps?
And, oh, yeah, that's right. When he was little, my other Lamaze class moms, my friends, all their babies were like, oh, they take naps. Now if they'll sleep through the night. Well, I'm like, mine didn't take naps. I would put him in his crib in a safe place, and I would lay down on the floor in the room and take a break, and try to rest for 10 or 15 minutes. That was just sanity, so I didn't crash. But, he was intense growing up. And I caution even saying that because there's a lot of intense kids out there that don't have bipolar.
Yeah.
It is not, you cannot diagnose little things in your kid's growth. You just need to accept and keep rolling with it forward.
And also, as far as signs that were odd, during the early years, there were a lot of behavioral issues I remember that I had during, I remember kindergarten, first grade, getting sent home for kicking the principal in the shin, literally. I spent a lot of time with my mom at work on days when I was suspended. I have a very clear memory of that. So
do you remember biting the secretary?
Biting the secretary. Those poor teachers. I really put everybody through the ringer growing up. It's been an adventure. But I think that was a part of it too, is just, there was a lot of stuff going on at home, but I think the behavioral issues were more than just, parents going through a divorce or things going on at home. There was another level of intensity to it that was more so than even my other siblings or other kids, that just raised eyebrows. Yeah. And even junior high and stuff, I was still pretty wild, and by the time I got to high school, I think I was withdrawing and starting to kind of pull away. But
well, I do remember talking about intensity and obsession. How old were you when you mowed lawns to get your first computer?
Oh,
10?
Yeah, like 10 or 12 years old.
And you bought a Mac back in the day when they were incredibly expensive?
Yeah, I was working like $4 or $5 an hour to save up for that thing.
And you did.
Same thing with karate. If I found something that really catered to my that got me going, it would become almost an obsession. I would make some pretty intense things happen. It's been a blessing and a curse. But yeah, absolutely. Moving on to question number 18. Is there anything that your mom regrets about how she dealt with your behavior in light of your diagnosis?
Probably not. I was never an aggressive disciplinarian. I would try and talk, and I sometimes thought talking was too much, and I slowly learned to just say, no, it's not okay, or, be more simple about it. But, I think if I had more resources, but I'm not sure the resources are there even today for a kid that's intense and throws tantrums when they're young. You have to move forward and get through all the different phases. I just don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah, well said. The next question is, at what age did you see certain traits of the illness in your son?
Other than the ones we talked about, the intensity and the rage and the frustration when he was little, I wasn't very aware because he became more withdrawn as a teenager. And so I didn't have easy, examples of things to be concerned about. Is that, do you think?
Yeah, I think past those teenage years, there was a period there where I was so closed off to the way I was feeling. It would have made it a lot harder to see things as an outside observer. You really have to be around the person enough to be an outside observer. And I was very in denial and trying to be perfect all the time, so I would hide the way I was feeling. People would ask me, how's it going? And I'd say fine, even if I was dying inside. So it was, it was a lot harder for people to see, I guess, what was going on. I think as far as like a definitive age where shit hit the fan, so to speak, would be, you know, the mid-20s during the hospitalizations, the cutting, everything was kind of, it was a progression. You know, I was in my teenage years, I started getting a little more intense and withdrawing a little more. In my early 20s, started drinking, withdrew even more. And I think the combination of probably the alcohol was the worst thing that I possibly could have done for myself. That is what probably was the catalyst that really triggered some intense episodes and pushed me finally to a place where I experienced like my first psychotic episode. Yeah, it was definitely a progression.
Well, another thing is about when you were a teenager. Teenagers are teenagers.
Yeah.
They aren't, they can be your wonderful best friend, and they can have swings, and they can get easily angry with you or not. That's not an age that I would ever attempt to diagnose bipolar.
That's hard, even like, for doctors to diagnose a teenager.
I'm like,
oh boy.
Those are another set of years that you just kind of get your way through a day at the time.
Yeah. Yes. Question number 20. Does your mom have bipolar disorder, and have other family members been diagnosed, like grandparents, great uncles, etc.?
I don't think there was actual diagnosis, but there were plenty of symptoms to see. And looking back, I think your dad had issues. His was more panic disorder and depression.
Anxiety disorder.
Right.
Yeah.
And his dad was, I think, much more bipolar on that side. And I have my swings. I have always struggled with depression and found it really refreshing when I was up and getting a lot accomplished. So I do have a gentle swing back and forth.
More like cyclothymic bipolar, but not, you know, type 1 or type 2.
Right. I've just gotten to be real aware of it. So they do say it is genetic, but, you know, we're all still learning all this, including the scientists.
Yeah. In my family, I mean, there are definitive, whether it's bipolar or something else, it's mental illness runs pretty rampant in our family. It's harder with a lot of, like my dad's generation. My dad passed away when I was 18, and that was, again, right around the time when, you know, You've Got Mail and America Online was, you know, it wasn't like the information age today where people were so much more aware of all this stuff. So my dad was never, you know, officially diagnosed, and his dad, of course, that generation didn't even talk about mental illness. So I think with a lot of our parents' generation, it's harder. It's harder sometimes to know if mental illness was in the family, you know, because there wasn't a lot of people being diagnosed, but there's a lot of secondhand information that sure points to a lot of things being off. So
listen to your family stories.
Family stories around the campfire. There's some hidden wisdom in there sometimes. Question number 21. When your son was a baby, did he have underlying problems like colic?
He had colic for a little bit, like a week or two, a little bit of it right after you were born, but not really, not significantly. The big issue for me looking back, and I did not see it or didn't know at the time, was his lack of sleep. I remember I used to have this recurring nightmare of waking with you during the night and then staying awake during the day. Anyway, my recurring nightmare was someone would come out in the morning and I would be sitting on the living room. No, you would be sitting on the living room couch. And I would be gone because I had just gotten used up.
No. Oh God. Yeah. Well, it was a lot. It was a handful. Question number 22. Was she extremely emotional when she was pregnant with you compared to other siblings that don't have bipolar disorder?
No. I have to say I'm one of those strange people that, not really strange, but I loved being pregnant. I had tried a long time. I was 30 when I was pregnant with Rob. And, you know, I just really enjoyed the feeling of life inside me.
Moving on to 23, how do parents differentiate between normal teenage behavior and symptoms of bipolar disorder?
Oh, I think that would be hard if... I would say
That's
it
a
would
tough
have
question.
to be extremes on a continuum back and forth and identifiable, not just a bad mood for a week or 5 days or 3 days. It would really have to be over time, and you're seeing regular swings, regular repeat behaviors. But even so, that's really, you're really on a mystery there with a teenage behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you could be very accurate.
That is a tough question, and incidentally, I do have a video on the channel that does talk about signs and symptoms in teens and kids, or pediatric bipolar disorder, and it is incredibly difficult for doctors to diagnose because of everything else going on socially and hormonally and everything during that time. So, but if you do want to know about that, that is a great video. It goes over a lot of signs and symptoms and things to watch out for that might give you some ideas of what to look for. So check that video out. That'll be a good way to elaborate on that question. Okay, moving on to number 24. Did your son excel in hobbies or work or show a certain determination to succeed?
Yes. For one was the karate that we've talked about, and another one was his interest in computers and computer science and computer programming when he was not even hardly a teenager. It was just, you know, when he got onto something, then I would quit worrying and kind of get on with my life because I knew he would be so focused.
Give you a break for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's very true, and that's kind of one of the, I guess, advantages, if you want to call it an advantage to bipolar mania, is that we can be extremely driven people when we do want something. In fact, every job, every hobby, everything I've ever done, even my heart and soul that I put into this YouTube channel, everything that has been a passion, especially if it started when I was manic, it's just been amazing. I'll always start at the bottom and end up becoming management or a supervisor in a job very quickly, or I'll open up a small karate school and it becomes the biggest one in town very quickly. But something I've also noticed with myself is that I get to kind of a pinnacle of a job or something where I get to the top and kind of have taken it as far as I can go, and then I holistically lose interest a lot of the time, and then it's kind of on to the next adventure. It's very common for people with bipolar disorder to switch hobbies or interests, like the weather, but the hobbies that I did stick to, oh boy, I wanted to be the best, and I think a lot of that drive came from part of the illness in a lot of ways. So one of the not so bad sides of how it's impacted my life, it has made me very successful in a lot of endeavors. Next question is, my mom wants to keep my mental illness a secret among her circle of friends. Does your mom feel shameful about your illness, and does she feel secondhand stigmatized for having a son with bipolar disorder?
I don't feel shameful. I have nothing but respect for the process that we've gone through to get where we are now and where you are now. We've basically separated, and he's owned his bipolar now, and this was not an easy path, folks. But anyway, secondhand stigmatized, yeah, that happens. I'm very careful about who I talk to people openly about my son's diagnosis and what he's been through in any respect. Because people that don't know it, don't understand it, haven't experienced it, don't have a kid that has some form of mental illness, if there's no way to relate, then I just don't go there. And when I have, it's just been very awkward, like, oh, that's nice,
Most people have a very skewed version of what bipolar disorder is, from some social meme they saw on Facebook or something. Yeah, absolutely. And then for the person that did post that question, my heart goes out to you, for your mom to keep it a secret among her friends or to feel shameful about your illness. that's really tough, you know, and that really is something that you can't control, that has nothing to do with you. That is your mom's issues, not yours. So
I was just going to say that it really was my growth to have to accept that I did nothing wrong. I didn't cause the bipolar. But that's a lot of counseling and a lot of personal growth within me. And that took a lot of years too. That took about as many years as we've been through, you know, to get to the point where I just had to be okay inside myself.
Yeah, absolutely. We are getting close to, we've got the last two questions here, so we're getting there. Question number 26. What were the kinds of things your son was misdiagnosed with before he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder?
Out of control kid when you were little. I don't know.
They were going for ADHD and learning
that's
disabilities, and
I'm a real basic mom. I'm not quick to do medications. They were suggesting that I put him on Ritalin, and I didn't in the end. I'm not sure if it would have helped anything, or now I know with his medication sensitivity it could have been a horrible thing.
Yeah, that would have probably been bad.
But I didn't know that then either. But I didn't do that. The diagnosis didn't come until his 20s.
Yeah.
So, and there was a long road before we got there.
In fact, my first diagnosis was just unipolar depression. I remember I went into a doctor and said, "Doc, I'm depressed," and he gave me a ton of Zoloft, which just, it made me so manic I was just high as a kite. I remember I called my mom and was like, "I'm fixed, I feel amazing, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner, this is awesome, I love life." I mean, oh my God, I was
remember
manic.
that, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, as a parent, you're like, finally, we found something that works, but...
And then it didn't.
Yeah, then the crashes happen even worse, or it pushes you up into total psychosis. It's scary if doctors do misdiagnose someone. So to prevent that, you know, researching, you know, get to know an illness before you go in and talk to a doctor. If you think it might be bipolar disorder, you know, get some mood journals, track moods over a period of time, learn about this stuff, because doctors, unless they live with it themselves, there's an impasse that happens, and also they only spend 30 minutes with us once every few months. That's not enough time to make a really good pinpointed accurate diagnosis. So as much learning about it as much as you possibly can is just, it's so important. My channel's a great resource for that. And the more you know, the more chances you can prevent a possible misdiagnosis. You know, you can help guide a doctor through not misdiagnosing your child if you know enough about this stuff. So the last question we have is, what boundaries or self-care does your mom do to make sure that she's still able to offer you support without burning herself out?
Well, in the current time, it's a matter of saying, I really hear you, and I really hear it's a hard time, and I just can't do this right now. Let's talk again later, or if it's really critical, you know, call me back, but I'm not on my game. And just, you know, it's where I am. And in my own life, I've dealt with, I'm super sensitive to other people, and I've dealt with depression, so I tend to be quiet. I don't like a lot of social activity, and so I've had to learn boundaries to protect that in my own self, not even the differentiation or in our relationship. I've just generally had to work on that. That's taken a lot of therapy, a lot of counseling through the years, and practice, and you know, then it would work and then it wouldn't work. Learning to set boundaries. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people take offense. Boy,
I think we had to having a conversation is what really helped us. It's like saying, you know, there's going to be times where I might tell you that I just can't be there for you, and I need you to know that it's nothing personal, that I'm struggling with my own stuff, and I need you to make your own food and put yourself to bed, you know, just to have that. If she didn't say that, it would be so much easier for me to take it personally if she just says,
Right.
I can't handle your shit today. You know, I mean, she doesn't say it like that, but you know, it's if have a plan in place, you know, if you're
Good
setting
point.
boundaries, say, kind of try and explain why. Say, hey, there's going to be times where I can't support you in the way that you need. I'll let you know when that happens. It's nothing personal, and you know, in a couple weeks I'll be right back there, you know, with you. But yeah, it's so important to take self-care, to not bleed yourself. Don't let, you know, your family members' mental illness create, you know, your own kind of struggles and your own psychological issues. It's just not worth it.
Right.
It really isn't.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. We made it through 27 questions. That's pretty darn good. Awesome. I'm really excited about that.
Yes, I'd like to say that it's sort of clear as mud. You know, a lot of this is just going through it and not giving up and continuing to ask questions and not make assumptions. It's not an easy path. It's not, you know, here's 3 things you can do and your life will be okay, or your kid's life will be okay. It's not like that. I'm sorry.
And it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's family has different triggers, different thresholds
Right.
for suffering, different family dynamics. It's all just relative. So it really, I think the bottom line is just it comes down to education and unconditional love. You know, learning as much as you possibly can, and unconditional
That's
love,
right.
and knowing when to let go. You know, those boundaries.
Yeah, unconditional love doesn't mean you're a doormat.
Yeah, that doesn't. Unconditional love does not mean cater to your child's every, you know, thing. Part of unconditional love is tough love. You know, is knowing when to set a boundary. You know,
And unconditional love for yourself, so
Yes.
that you're setting personal boundaries because you care for your own balance. It's complicated.
yes, it's complicated.